name is Joseph Beige. I'm a real estate attorney on Long Island, and I want to welcome you to today's webcast. As always, for our returning viewers, I want to thank you for your support and your positive comments. For our new viewers, if this is your first time, let me explain simply what we do. And that's that with the help of a guest, we discuss a topic that would be of interest to real estate consumers, homeowners, residential, commercial, people who are renting, anybody on Long Island who's involved in real estate. And with the guest, we hope to help you get to understand a certain topic a little bit more in depth so that you can make better, more informed decisions on your next real estate transaction. Now, today's topic's a little bit of a sore subject for anybody who owns property anywhere on Long Island. And that's because we're going to be talking about property taxes. Now, spoiler alert, we're not going to be able to tell you today how to lower your taxes, all right, or how to make you any happy about writing that check. However, what we're going to try to do is hopefully get you to understand the process, all right, how to be able to analyze and look at your tax bill that you receive so that you can understand what you're paying, why you're paying, and also more importantly, to see if there are any errors that are in it and maybe any discounts that you're entitled to that you're not getting. In order to do that today, we have, I think, is probably one of the best guests that I could ask for on it. And that's the newly elected Islip Town tax receiver, Mr. Andy Wittman. Mr. Wittman, thank you for being here today.
Morning, Joe. How are you? Happy March.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, and we are filming this in March, which means by the time it airs, it will be April, and the second half tax bills will be coming out, or at least be due. And with that, Mr. Wittman, before we get into how somebody should interpret their bills and all of the fun stuff, you had an interesting path to becoming the Islip Town tax receiver. I was wondering if you can give us a little overview of how you got there.
Sure, absolutely. Well, my background, I'm born and raised on Long Island. Went to St. Lawrence School for grammar school in Sayville. Graduated Bayport Blue Point High School. Went off to college. After coming back from college, became a 911 dispatcher and then a New York City firefighter. I got injured in the line of duty, unfortunately, and my career ended back in 2012. I had a young family at the time. I was married in 2007. In 2012, I had almost a 2-year-old and a 6-month-old. So I was 35 years old. So I was in a position that I had to kind of reinvent my life and work towards a new career path that was going to work for me. So I had been running a real estate investment company while I was on the job. And then since retirement of the FDNY, I enjoyed doing it. I had a lot of clients doing real estate, mostly, like I said, with investments, buy and hold, fix and flip, those different types of things. And then I had my own types of investments that I did. And I just knew that that was not something that was going to be long term. So I had gotten involved politically, worked on several races. Actually, my first campaign I worked on was when I was in high school. Rick Lazio's campaign 30 some odd years ago probably was. I think it was 30 years this year, 92 if my memory serves me correct. And then I started getting a little bit more politically involved, and the position became available for a tax receiver for the town of Islip because my predecessor, Alexis Wyke, ran for state senate in 2020. And once that position became available is when I decided to throw my hat in the ring and run for tax receiver in 2021.
I want to stop right here and thank you for your service with the FDNY.
Of course. Miss it every day.
You know, I don't know anybody who's ever retired out of that job who doesn't tell me that they miss it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So now let's talk about the office of, or the title or the position of tax receiver, because I think it's very misunderstood. I think the general public, first off, can't tell the difference between the assessors and the tax receiver. It's all one big conglomerate that charges them money. What specifically does the tax receiver's office do?
Well, what I've been telling everybody, I say, here's the Cliff Notes version of what we do. The Cliff Notes version of what we do is we send out the tax bill. We have a warrant that comes down from the Suffolk County Legislature every year in December. This year's warrant is a $1.3 billion warrant. We send out the tax bill. We receive the funds, receive, I think they changed the name to receiver of taxes as opposed to collector of taxes. I think it was a softer way of saying it. We receive the property tax payments from all the different taxpayers. Islip Town is about 100,000 parcels in the town of Islip. And then we disperse those funds throughout the tax collection season, which starts December 1st and goes through May 31st. And we disperse those to the county comptroller or to the town comptroller. And then their job is to disperse those to all the different line items. When you look at your property tax bill, you'll see the first line item is your school tax, and then every other subsequent line item underneath there. And that's what the comptroller's job is to do. The town comptroller And once they satisfy all those different line items, then they send the payments out to the county, and the county does what they do on their end. So that's kind of the Clip Notes version of what my office does.
Now you mentioned a warrant that comes from the Suffolk County Legislature. What is that? Because it almost sounds like the legislature tells the tax receiver's office, this is what you need to go and collect from residents.
Correct. It's a legal document. You hear the people say, "Oh, it's a warrant." Yes, I'm actually getting served a warrant. I actually get served a warrant. It is the legal document that gives my office the ability to send out that tax bill. Now, it's very frequent every December. I mean, I've only been in the position for 3 months. I was elected November 2nd, started November 22nd. And those couple of weeks, taking a lot of phone calls saying, "Hey, I haven't got my tax bill yet. Hey, I haven't got my tax bill yet." And it's because we haven't sent it out yet. Well, why haven't you sent it out yet? Because we haven't gotten the legal authority to do so. So that legal authority comes from the Suffolk County Legislature. They send it to us. They email it over first, and then we get the physical one that somebody comes and, serves a warrant that you would expect in criminal court. And then we have everything ready to go. We have our IT team in place, and we get everything ready, and then we go to town printing and mailing out 100,000 property tax bills, which is, as you can imagine, is
substantial undertaking.
It is. I mean, the town of Islip is the third largest township in the state of New York, and warrant-wise, collection-wise, Islip Town is number 2 in Suffolk County behind Brookhaven.
And you told me the number previously, and the number was pretty, impressive, and a lot more than I thought. How much money, or the amount of money that is dispersed and that runs through the receiver's office?
It's a minimum of $1.3 billion.
That's with a B.
That's with a B. Yep, $1.3 billion. We have a minimum threshold that we're supposed to collect, but again, that's all dependent upon whether or not the property taxpayers pay their property tax bill, unfortunately. But it goes up, as you can imagine, just like your property taxes go up every year for all intents and purposes. So does our warrant. I've looked back at previous years, and we just crossed that that $1 billion threshold just in the last couple of years here.
Staying with the tax receiver's office for a little bit, what is the one thing or something about what the tax receiver's office does that would surprise most people?
Well, as I talked about, I think the first thing, and it'll be a little redundant, people are not aware of the amount of money and payments that we process through our office. We have as I mentioned before, we have 100,000 parcels in the town of Islip, and we have that $1.3 billion warrant, which we collect in a 6-month time frame. So I think, and I have an office staff, full-time office staff of 8 people. So I think if you can imagine the amount of phone calls that comes into the office with different questions, the amount of online payments that are processed, the amount of in-person payments that are processed, the amount of mail payments that are processed, and I can go on and go on. I think that's probably where one of the biggest disconnects are, is that we have a lot to do. As I said, I talked about third largest town, second biggest collection. I only have a full-time staff of 8 people. So it's easier said than done. One says, "Well, just hire more people." Well, what is that going to do to your property taxes if we have to hire more people? So we do hire seasonal staff. The tax collection season I talked about before, it starts December 1st and it runs through May 31st. We hire seasonal staffers during the first and the last month of the tax season because those are our busiest times. The first half of your property taxes are always due every year. That's a hard date, doesn't change. I know they extended it a couple of years ago because of COVID, right. But for all intents and purposes, that date is January 10th. Okay. So that tax bill comes out second week of December, and the first half is due within about 4 weeks. So again, think about that. All the different people that have mortgages on their properties, we got to notify all those banks. We got to mail out the tax bill. So you can imagine in a 4-week time frame, the volume of work that gets done from the time that we send that tax bill out to the first half of our collection when it's due on the 10th. The second half of the property tax bill is due on or before May 31st. So now you have 4.5 months to pay that second half. So it gives people a little bit more breathing room. But that's why the staffing works the way it works.
Now, kind of going to flip the question. What is something, or what are one of the things that the public would be surprised that your office does not do?
Probably the number one thing I would say where they're not familiar that we don't do, or where there might be a little bit disconnect, is the difference between my office, the receiver of taxes office, and the assessor's office. Okay. So we get a ton of phone calls that come into my office about exemptions, usually the star exemption. So a perfect example. I describe people the difference between the tax receiver's office and my office and the assessor's office as we're like brother and sister. We're related, but we still do our own different things, but we're definitely related. We work in tandem. A lot of the information, and I'm sure we'll talk about it later, on the property tax bill comes directly from the assessor's office. All right. And that's probably where there's the biggest disconnect and misunderstanding of what my office does versus the assessor's office. So I already gave you the Cliff Notes version of what my office does. I don't want to really speak too much about the assessor's office just because it's out of my title and out of my scope. But the largest thing is the exemptions, whether they be star exemptions, military exemptions, volunteer firefighter, EMS workers, and the other 40 some odd, maybe 50 exemptions that are out there. All of that gets done through the assessor's office. We take a lot of phone calls because there are questions on it because they read it off their property tax bill and they immediately think, oh, this came from the receiver of taxes. I have to call the receiver of taxes office. So we do have a lot of foundational information to answer and try to help the taxpayer. But sometimes if it gets a little bit too in the weeds and we're not sure, we say, you got to call the assessor's office. They're the ones to handle that.
And we're going to come back to the tax bill in a second, but you did hit on one thing, and I think this is just interesting question to throw out. As you mentioned, you sent, your office is responsible for sending out the tax bill and for receiving the payment.
Correct.
But if a homeowner or property owner doesn't make that payment, what happens what's the process from there? Just in general.
Okay. General statement, when a payment, whether it's the homeowner or a bank paying on behalf of the homeowner, right? So if that payment is made late, so the first half I told you was due January 10th. So if that payment is made late, on the back of the tax bill, it shows there's a late penalty schedule that's on the back of the tax bill. And basically on the 11th of each month, starting January 11th, there's a 1% penalty that gets put on whatever your first half of your property taxes were. That's another disconnect. A lot of people think it's 1% or 2% or 3% of the whole tax bill. It's not. It's only on the first half because that second half is not due until on or before May 31st. All right. So on January 11th, there's a 1% penalty. February 11th, 2% penalty, and so on and so on and so on. Okay. At the last day of the collection, which is May 31st of every year, unless May 31st falls on a weekend, then it's that following Monday. We close our books. That day after whatever our last day is, we close our books. So this year, May 31st happens to be during the week. It's the last day we can receive payment in our office. If you show up on June 1st, we will unfortunately tell you, I'm sorry, we cannot process your payment because legally, and that's where a lot of the laws from New York real estate property tax law and the Suffolk County Tax Act are what dictates the things that I have to do in my office throughout the course of the year. And that hard date of May 31st is a hard date. So after that, if there's any outstanding payment that is due on a property, we send that out to the county comptroller's office out in Riverhead, and then you have to make payment through their office for any back taxes or late taxes.
And I think that's something else what people don't realize. They think, if they're late, they just pay it late.
Correct. We've gotten several checks in the mail just in the last couple of weeks for back taxes. And we have to try to reach out to that person and say, it's not done through here, it's done through the county comptroller's office.
And that's important, not just for convenience, but if you're paying interest for late payments and
Correct.
You send it to the wrong person or the wrong party, by the time they send it back to you, and then you can redirect it to the right person, another week and a half can go by, and that can cost you, again, depending on your property tax, a fairly
Correct.
substantial amount.
Correct.
Okay. Now, when we talk generally about the tax bill, and as you said, the tax bill is generated by your office. The numbers, the tax rates, things of that come from the assessor's office.
Correct.
So to me, I kind of look at the tax bill, and I always tell clients to review the tax bill because it's kind of like reviewing the X-ray. You want to make sure everything there is what it is, or better even is like an invoice on your Amazon delivery. You don't just open the box and start. You go through and make sure everything you ordered is there.
Correct.
With the tax bill, you need to understand it enough to make sure that every discount that you're entitled to is there. All right. Now it's going to pop up here, so don't worry. Nobody has to go running and grab their tax bill. But looking at a tax bill, you have some general information. Now, of course, you want to make sure the address is right, that you receive the tax bill for for your property. But then you also get into certain things there that I think are interesting. Now, one I know is actually, as you discussed, right in the middle of the first column, you see things such as land assessment, and total assessment, and uniform percentage. Those are numbers that come from the tax assessor's office, correct?
Correct. Okay. So that middle section of your property tax bill, which talks about property type and then goes down to tax code, roll section, et cetera, all of that information is generated from the assessor's office. Okay.
Now, granted, the assessor is obviously the proper person to ask for this question, so I'm not, just for information when somebody's looking at it, one of the things that they should first, and I'm sure most people do, is they look at the part where it says the valuation. Mm-hmm. And they look at it and they go, wait a minute, I just had my house appraised and it's on Zillow. I had an appraisal for a home equity loan, a HELOC, and the number is much higher than this.
Right.
Or consequently, you get the opposite. I get a client who's looking to buy a house. The sales agent has it listed for a certain price. They pull up a tax bill and they say, wait a minute, the town assessed it at a lower amount. Why should I pay that amount?
Right.
There is a disconnect with those amounts.
Absolutely, there's a disconnect there, and the disconnect is that, as it says on the tax bill, is that is a full value assessment. It doesn't say it's a full value appraisal. It says it's a full value assessment. Those numbers that are in there, whether it's the full value of the land, the total, or the uniform percentage of value, all those numbers are on there to help determine what your property tax bill is, not what your house is worth. Now, I mentioned before, I've been in real estate for the better part of 15 years. I'm a realtor as well. So many times realtors, and I'm sure yourself as a real estate attorney, you have to explain that, because countless times I've talked to clients and go, well, my neighbor's house sold for $900,000, but my property tax bill only says my house is worth that. That's not what it's saying. It's what your full value assessment is, not what your appraised value is.
And again, like we said, the assessment, there is a whole different process and different formula, which is, again, not your office and not what we're trying to cover today.
Correct.
But again, I'm sure that's a common question, as you just said. People
absolutely.
Call you up
Absolutely. I mean, the only other couple things I'll just touch on there, when you see property type as the top of the thing, that's a New York State classification code. So residential versus commercial. That's the general two different titles, right? Residential, commercial. But then you have 1 family, 2 family, 3 family, 4 family, multifamily, small building, different. There's all different types of property classification codes. That's what that code relates to. So if you own a single family house, most of your taxpayers are, in that capacity. Non-commercial single family is usually a 210 classification. That's what that means. Duplex, 220, threeplex, 230. So that's basically what that classification means. The land assessment, just the basic value of what the assessed value is of your land. And then the total assessment, which is what the land and the property is combined. And like I said, those are the numbers that are used to help determine what the value of your property tax rate is. So a lot of people talk about, well, I want to grieve my taxes. You actually don't grieve your taxes. You grieve your assessments. All right. I know you don't want to go down that rabbit hole because you said that in your opening monologue.
No, that's it. So,
but back to that disconnect, that's where a lot of these little anecdotal disconnects are.
Okay. Now, just dealing with the property type, because as you said, there are different types and that's a classification. Because it's a number, it's a little bit harder for someone to understand. If I have a single family and I get a tax bill that says, or a tax statement that says I have a multifamily or a 2-family home, I know, wait a minute, something's not right. Where is it? Or, I know everything can be Googled.
Yeah, that was going to be the answer to your question. You could just Google New York State classification codes. If you just put that in, I believe that the document should pretty much come right up. I have a printed copy in my office, so very frequently, infrequently, I will get a phone call saying, what's a 448? I don't know. I know what I mentioned before, 210, 220, 230, because those are the most common I've dealt with, especially on the investing side. But I'm like, I have no idea what a 448 is. So I have to go to that booklet, look it up, and I tell them, okay, yeah, it's a small building with an accessory apartment or whatever a 448 is.
One more section on the tax bill that I think is important for people to look at, and you hit on it a little bit before. And that's if you look to the upper right corner, and that's where it has the exemptions. Now, the first thing is obviously you want to look there to see if you're getting all the exemptions you're entitled to or that you've applied for. Now, what are the types of exemptions that are in there? I know you listed there are multiple.
Right. I touched on them before. I would want to say there's somewhere between 40 to 50 different types of exemptions that are out there that exist. Now, some are that it varies for whether or not you're eligible for one from person to person to person or from property to property to property. So, for example, STAR is only available on single family, primary residence, owner occupied primary residence. That's it. You can't get STAR on a commercial piece of property. Okay. And you can only get it on one. So I have a rental property, but it's not owner occupied. I get it on my personal house. I can't get STAR on that. All right. And then there's the volunteer firefighter EMS exemption. And that has its own qualifications. You have to have 5 years. You have to do a minimum of 5 years in that respective department in order to qualify for that. You have to do that for 20 years. And once you hit the 20-year mark, then you get it in perpetuity. And if you happen to pass away, your spouse will also get it until there's a transfer of title. All right. So there's different qualifications for all the different exemptions. As I said, I'm familiar with a lot of them because we get a lot of the phone calls on it.
But they are the exemptions are governed by the assessor's office as
correct.
regulations.
Correct. Yeah. So any applications that have to be done for any of these exemptions are done through the assessor's office. And that's the place, whether you go on there online onto their website and follow whatever tutorials or whatever they have for the different exemptions that are available online, or call them up or wind up going in person. All of those are done. And from my understanding from sitting down and speaking with the assessor, the one time I've gotten a chance to sit down with her, March 1st is a hard date for any exemptions that are out there. So kind of like I talked to you before, May 31st, my books are closed at the end of that day, and you can't pay on the 2nd or on the 1st. Same thing with the assessor's office. You can't come in on March 2nd and want to file. You can file, but you wouldn't have done it in time for the following year's property tax bill.
Gotcha.
All right. So if you wanted that, if you were eligible for the volunteer firefighter or any one of those exemptions, you would have done that paperwork, and it would be, if you get approved for it, on your next property tax bill the following year that goes out in December.
Right. So now, basically, so a taxpayer, again, as I said, one of the most important parts that they can look at on their tax bill is for the exemptions to make sure they're getting everything that they're entitled to. If they see a dispute, something, or they see that they think they're not getting an exemption that they applied for, they'll notice it on the bill.
Correct.
Now, at that point, should they direct their inquiry to you or to the assessor's office? To the
assessor's office. The one other thing that I'll mention is when you're looking at that box that you were talking about, at the title of that box, it says exemption codes and values. A big disconnect, like I said, there's a little spot of disconnects throughout the tax bill, is people will see a dollar amount there, or what they believe is a dollar amount. And it's not a dollar amount. It specifically says exemption codes and values. So, for example, I'm looking at a property tax bill, which happens to be mine that I brought today, and my STAR basic says $5,000. And a lot of people think, oh, I'm getting $5,000 off my property tax bill. It's not. It's a code and it's an evaluation. That's all that it's used for. So there's that little disconnect. But to your point, yes, that's where you would check what you currently have on that property tax bill. Now, one of the things I try to recommend people to do all the time is especially if they keep their previous year's property tax bills, you can compare from what was it last year to what was it this year. And that gives you, whether it's one of the line items or anything, just any of the information that's on that tax bill, is it synonymous from year to year? If not, what's different? Depending upon what's different is either going to be most likely my office or the assessor's office.
That's interesting. That's an excellent tip to keep the tax bills, compare them, because again, for a lay person, it makes it very fast, very easy. What's different? And if you see something that's different, ask a question.
Yeah. Well, the other thing too is, and this is one of the things since running for office and being in the position, to that point of keeping that information is available to the property owners right on our website, tax.islipny.gov. That's our payment portal, but it gives the taxpayers the ability to go on there, and once they register an account, and they could view or pay their property taxes online, but they also have the ability to view the previous 9 years worth of property tax bills. So even if they were to have a fire, flood, they lost it, or they moved, or whatever it was, they could still go on there on their account that they create, and they could view those bills, they could print those bills, and then they could do that comparison year over year.
And as you mentioned, the website, and I know when talking, there's some processes you are undertaking to update and modernize the tax receiver's office as well, which also saves some money.
Correct.
And one of them is to make it easier for people in the profession. Hopefully that information will become available to us as well.
Correct. So I am looking to create an online portal for third-party vendors. Third-party vendors meaning anyone that's pretty much not the homeowner, right? Because we already have, as I just described, we have that capability for the homeowners. We don't have a third-party capability. So for real estate agents, brokers, attorneys, banks, appraisers, you name it, anyone that's in the industry that needs to determine information that would be on the property tax bill. And one thing I probably haven't mentioned, this is all public information. So anyone at any point in time can call up the receiver of taxes office or come into the office, print a tax bill for your property, your neighbor's property. There's nothing that is being hid from anybody. And we don't have that capability online right now. And the only way for those third parties to get that information is to call us up Monday through Friday from 8:30 to 4:30. So coming from the business background, as I talked to you before, and I've been involved in other different businesses, I look at my position as an elected office is I'm beholden to the taxpayers from a fiscal financial standpoint. But I have to try to find that healthy balance of giving them the information that is required for my office in as easy a way as possible, but also from a cost-effective standpoint as well. So I'm managing the differences between those and finding them out. Again, like I said, I only had 3 months here, 3 months on the job, so to say. But that is one of the things that I'm looking for. There's a lot of other municipalities that have their information that's on the tax bills available to the public online. Now, you're really solving two problems. You're making business easier for those agents, bankers, brokers, where now that information is at your fingertips on your smartphone, on your laptop, tablet, whatever, 24/7, 365. Well, what's that going to reduce on the other side? It's going to reduce the call volume into my office. Well, if we reduce the call volume into my office, that makes my staff have more time on their hands, makes them a little bit more efficient on doing the job that they have in front of them. As you heard me talk about before, a $1.3 billion warrant with 100,000 properties, and I got a staff of 8. So as you can imagine, especially during that tax season from December 1st to May 31st, we are slammed. We are slammed. It's
and that's
from
not even taking into account your interactions with other parts of the municipality, Islip Town, Suffolk County. Because
correct.
I'm sure you don't exist in isolation, and that during times during the year you're being requested to supply information to them as well.
Right. No, absolutely. I mean, there's, while we have that season that I talked about, that 6-month season from December to June 1st, basically, we have the layover after June 1st of getting all our books in order, sending everything out to the county. And then we have a little bit of a lull time. Now, even though I haven't been there, it's still my understanding of how the office works. We have a little bit of a lull in maybe July and August. And then September comes around, and then we start gearing up for the property tax bill that goes out in December. So there's a lot of prep work that goes into that. And the closer we get towards that December 1st date, out of the gate, it's like going to a horse track. It's like going to a horse track, and the bell goes off, and the gates fly open, and you're off to the races. And then, Groundhog Day all over again.
Now, dealing with taxpayers, what are some of the biggest or most common mistakes that you see taxpayers make that affects them negatively when it comes to their tax bill?
Well, I think probably, I wouldn't say, just like I said, there's anecdotal disconnects with different things. I wouldn't say there's really one big thing. I would say because of the volume that we do, we have 3 different payment methods. We have online payment, as I talked about. We have in-person payment, and we have through the mail. Now, I've been trying to direct as many people to the online payment portal as possible. I did sit down with our developers and made it a little bit more user-friendly since taking office. And the reason why I do that and why it's a benefit to the taxpayers is, and we get these calls all the time, and I got them in my first month being there, is that they get their bill in the mail, the ones that pay on their own, not through the bank, They get their bill in the mail. They write a check out, put it in an envelope, put a stamp on it, put a return sticker on it. They stick it in the mailbox. What happens to it after that is not anything that they control, nor I can control. So we constantly will get phone calls of, hey, my check hasn't cleared. Well, that's because we haven't received it. Well, I sent it 3 weeks ago. And now what do you have? Now they're past the due date. They have a 1% penalty that's on top of that. Or they do send it and we get it in the mail, but we get it past the January 10th date. And if they didn't postmark it, they still get hit with the penalty. And unfortunately, there's nothing in the law that allows myself or anyone else in my office to give them a break based upon the circumstances. If it's received in our office and it says clearly on the tax bill, it must be postmarked by the due date. So you could go into the post office, have it postmarked on January 10th, give it to the person, they stamp it, and it's still not come to my office. So as you can see, that's why I'm trying to direct those people to the online payment portal, because you will get an email showing that your payment was made. We'll get email notification. And then usually if there's a problem with payment, whether there was insufficient funds or whether you put the wrong account number in, that comes up within a day or two. And we can get back. So that payment portal online, if you link it to a qualified checking account, it costs you $1 for the transfer. If you pay by credit card, it costs you the 2.09% interest. But think about what the dollar transfer costs compared to paying a 1% or 2% penalty should that get lost in the mail. And what you see what I'm saying? So like I said, there's not really one major thing. The one thing I will talk about, and you'll see on the top of your tax bill, the item number. Anytime someone calls our office, we always ask them for the item number, because there's two pieces of information that are on the tax bill that will link directly to your property. The item number is one and the tax map number is the other. No matter how many times the property is bought and sold, ownership changes, whatnot, none of that matters. That item number sticks to that property. That tax map number also sticks to that property. So to get back to the rest of the payments is the in-person. That's the last. And constantly what will back up is you'll see when you look at your property tax bill on the bottom, you have two coupons. It says number 1 and number 2. Number 1 is for your first half. Number 2 is for your second half. So a lot of times with the in-person payment, we'll have people come in with just their check and they don't bring their property tax bill with them. They don't have the coupon at the bottom. So what does that do? That backs up the line at my office, because now they have to go to the customer service information station in my office to print a property tax bill in order for us to use the coupon, because we need the coupon in order to process the payment. That's the type of system that we have. That's why we need that coupon. We slide the coupon through, and that which identifies the property, identifies the taxpayer, and then we slide their payment through. So that's where that backs up as well. So that's where I think efficiency-wise, they're all intertwined, whether it's the online payment, the in-person payment, or the mail payment. And that's where a little of those disconnects are. And that's where there's a little bit more awareness. And I'm very happy to report that my pushing of the online has been very successful, because when we did our drawdown right after the collection date of January 10th, it was the highest drawdown that has ever been done in the 10 years or so that the online payment system has been available. We did the most online payments.
That's great. Congratulations.
Ever. So I'm very happy with that. And I just want to keep that momentum going. I mean, there's other things that I'm looking to add to our online, not to the online payment portal, but to our online website for the receiver's office. And that's some tutorial videos, kind of like what we're doing here, to go over different facets of the property tax bill, maybe to have a tutorial of how to use the online, just so people can feel a little bit more comfortable. But again, I've been here 3 months, and some of the stuff will happen over time.
Great. Well, we're running out of time, but there is one last subject
Sure.
I just want to bring up, and we can hopefully talk about. All right. Now, for many people on Long Island, they have mortgages, and as we've said, briefly hit on, and they know their bank pays that mortgage, pays that property tax for them. Mm-hmm. The deadline, now what they actually get is not a tax bill. And the deadlines and the dates that they get those are a little bit different. And that can sometimes also create a disconnect, I'm sure, with people calling your office wondering where things are.
Correct.
Just, if you can, just briefly explain what that normal disconnect is for people who have their bank paying their property tax.
Okay. So when we send out the tax bills in December, as I talked about 60 to 65% go in an electronic file to the banks. And the banks use servicers to pay the property tax bills. And the other 40 to 45% go directly out to the taxpayer, right? So they're responsible for making those payments in that electronic file that we send out with the same deadline, January 10th. And they'll usually send a very large payment. But then there's a lot of times where people are buying and selling houses in October, November, December, January. All of that stuff is still going on. So sometimes payments get, supposed to be handled by the title company, or the closing agency, the attorney, escrow, somebody along those lines is supposed to make those. But sometimes those things are lost in the mail. Every February, we send out a statement. It looks exactly like your property tax bill, but it has a watermark on it that says this is not a bill. And in that same bottom portion where I was talking about before with the coupon 1 and the coupon 2, it will show whether or not, if you have a mortgage, we send these statements out to you every February, and we do it again in July for the second payment. We will send those out to you in February to show your first half was paid or it wasn't, and who it was paid by and the date that it was paid on. And now that's most people use that as their receipt when they're filing their income taxes. A lot of times they save that. And then again, we'll do that in July after we close out our books. We'll send another statement with the watermark saying this is not a bill, but it looks exactly like a property tax bill, but it's a property tax statement. And again, on the second coupon, it'll say whether or not your second half was paid. So those are two notifications that homeowners who have their property taxes escrowed through their monthly mortgage payment really need to pay attention to, because it is not uncommon with mortgages being bought and sold all the time from banks and different things and transfers here and there, that a payment is missed from a mortgage company. Now, ultimately, at the end of the day, and I say this to taxpayers all the time, you are responsible for your property tax payment, and you're choosing to use your mortgage company to pay for you. So that homeowner is essentially using a third party to do and pay the property tax bills, which they have every right. But I would say when that does come late and it's from a mortgage company, the mortgage company usually picks up that fee.
Sure. No, I think they have to. But the important part there is that if you have a mortgage, don't just take that envelope, stick it aside, and worry
Correct.
about giving it to your accountant at the end of the year for your taxes. Open it up, because if your lender didn't make the property tax payment for you, you want to get on the phone, because again, ultimately, it's still your problem.
Correct. Yes. Ultimately, at the day, it is the responsibility of the taxpayer.
Excellent.
Absolutely.
Great. Mr. Wittman, I want to thank you so much for being here today.
You're welcome, Joe.
It was great to have you. I learned a lot. I hope everybody else did as well. Also, we put a face to, as Mr. Wittman usually likes to joke, he's one of the most hated people in the county.
Yes, when I was running for office, just to make people laugh, because it's the tax receiver, I always told people, I'm running for the sexiest position in the town of Islip. And then we're waiting for it. I'm like, the tax receiver. We get a big joke. Now, as the tax receiver, going out and presenting, going to different organizations, I go, and I am now the most hated man in the town of Islip, the tax receiver. So it's just to keep it light. No one likes paying their property tax bill, but I'm a big proponent on keeping it light. Try to make them laugh. I joke with people on the phone all the time. They go, who am I talking to? I'm like, you're talking to the tax receiver. I go, you're so funny. I go, no, that's actually true. You're actually talking to the tax receiver. Just to keep it light as best I can. Life's too short and a lot going on in our world. And, if I can make a person laugh, smile, joke with them on the phone a little bit,
I'm sure it's appreciated. Again, I appreciate you having you here today. I appreciate you putting up with all my questions.
No problem.
As always, I want to thank everybody for watching. And again, can't help say that I'm going to make this made you happy about paying your taxes, but more importantly, now you understand how to read your bill, how to interpret it, because again, mistakes about the classification for your property can be costing you money. If there are exemptions that you think you're entitled to that are not showing up, that you're not getting, that's costing you money. And again, understanding those deadlines, because that definitely will be costing you money in penalty. Once again, my name is Joseph Beige. I'm a real estate attorney on Long Island. If you have any questions or any follow-up, you can find me at my internet website, which is beigelaw.com. You can certainly reach out to me by phone or by email. I'll be more than happy to answer any questions. Thank you. Thanks again, Mr. Wittman.